Good evening and welcome to the Municipality of Monroeville Zoning Hearing Board meeting for Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. And if we could remember the 11 victims from the synagogue shooting and that the verdict has come in this evening. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Sharon, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Grisiak?
Here.
Mr. D'Agostino?
Here.
Mrs. Wilkins? Here. Mr. Gatos?
Here.
Mr. Hutchison?
Here.
Mr. Dice?
Here.
Mr. Weldon?
Here.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion for the minutes of our July 5th, 2023 meeting, please.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion, second, please.
I'll second.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And before we proceed with old business, I would like to make a change to the agenda. We have two new items on the agenda from residents, and I would like to bring those to the floor first, if we may, Paul.
Sure.
First
So
item.
under new business, the first item is 23-26-A, John Connors. Applicant requested dimensional variance from section 207.3A lot and yard requirements of the Monroeville zoning ordinance number 1443 as amended to install a 40-foot by 40-foot storage building in the front yards of the property that face Center Road and My Way. The property address is 274 Center Road, tax parcel 743D041 in the C2 Business Commercial Zoning District and is a corner lot.
Thank you. Is the applicant present, please? Would you please come forward?
Sure.
Have you signed in by chance?
I have not,
Okay, would you sign in, please,
of course.
and then state your name for the secretary?
Sure. John Connors.
Would you please raise your right hand? In a matter before us, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Please state your case.
Yes, so I bought the property earlier this year from Harry Luzader, and I'm really just using it as a storage building. We have a couple race cars that we keep in Harry's old garage, and if you probably have the survey there, it's a sort of an odd-shaped parcel. Originally had, I think, 15-foot setbacks, and I think it was amended to a 40-foot setback at some point. And we'd just like to build another building on the other end of the property, so that's why we're asking for an amendment to that setback to get it a little closer to the street, because it's a triangular-shaped property, it doesn't really fit. And in fact, the 40-foot setback, my existing building is within that 40-foot setback, so. And I think the one question that did come up was site distances. And
Here's
I-
the building, the current
Right.
building is on the
Right.
display.
Yeah, and so if, I submitted a couple of 3D images to show where the building would sit. The thing with the site distance is the traffic coming down Center Road, it comes up over a hill, so you really can't exit without going all the way to the street and stopping pretty deliberately. So I don't really think there's an issue with the new building and site distances because of that need to stop at the end of the parking lot. So.
How high is the proposed building?
The building, we don't have final plans on it, but I think it's a one-story garage essentially with a roof, so I thought I had it in here.
And this will
somewhere.
be just for storage and
Yeah, storage of
working on the
vehicles.
cars and
Storage
stuff
of
like that?
vehicles, yeah,
Full utilities will be in the building?
yes, yes. Yeah, one-story garage with a roof, so I assume it's about a 20-foot building, something like that.
Paul,
Sorry, you had mentioned that there's detailed engineering drawings to be provided. When will those be
finished or done, or?
I could do those, I just didn't want to get too far ahead on it before,
Okay.
you know, we had this meeting.
That'll all be part of the building permit.
Okay.
And once the variance is obtained, if it's obtained, he still has to go get a building permit.
Right.
All right.
Paul, everything was posted.
Yes.
Did we receive anything, any correspondence from any residents?
Nothing.
Is there anybody in the audience that has any comments on this matter? Records show none. Any other folks on the board? Questions? I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion for approval.
You have a second, please?
I'll second it.
Motion and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good luck with your project.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next item, Paul, please.
Okay, 23-27-A, Andrew and Eileen Sorby. Applicant requested dimensional variance from section 207.3 lot and yard requirements of the Monroeville zoning ordinance number 1443 as amended to install an above-ground pool in the front yard of the property that faces Miller Alley. The property address is 1729 Miller Alley, tax parcel 640A009, in the R2 Single Family Residential Zoning District, and is a through lot with, which has 2 front yards.
Applicant? Sir?
My name's Andrew Sorby.
Have you signed in?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Would you raise your right hand, please? In the matter before us, do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your case.
Okay, my daughter, that's my daughter's, where my daughter lives, and her family, and they want a pool. They had a pool. The pool was old and whatnot. We took it down, and we're putting up another pool professionally. It's about an 18-foot round pool in the back front yard, because the way this house is built is 2 front yards.
Understood.
So it's in the back one.
So it's right behind this fence that's currently
Yes,
existing?
there is at least a 4-foot fence all the way around that whole area.
Okay.
So this will be an above ground?
Excuse me?
It's an above ground pool,
Yes.
not?
Yes, it's an above-ground pool.
If you guys are to speak, you need to come up to the podium.
I'm hard of hearing. I wear hearing aids in
No,
both
it's not.
ears.
I was talking to your
Oh,
family
okay.
members back there.
He's doing fine.
He's doing a
You're
super
fine,
job.
sir.
Yep. It's one of those weird things as far as having the 2 front yards causes
Yes, it's a weird
this
thing.
kind of.
In fact, I
issue.
didn't know it had 2 front yards. I thought it had a front and a backyard.
Paul, anything from any neighbors?
No, letters went out, property was posted, no comments.
Anything from anybody in the audience? Records show that there's none. Anybody on the board? Questions? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second, please. Motion and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're not from Pittsburgh. Where's your accent?
Well, my
You're in New
original
York.
address was the Bronx.
The Bronx, okay.
So I could say water and daughter and coffee in New York.
Thank you, folks. Good night.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we turn to old business. One moment, please. Let me just get sorted out here. It's the Bronx coming out. All right. Paul, first item.
Okay, so under old business, it's one applicant, they have 10 variance requests for 2 different properties. So I was
Let's do
gonna
the
read
first 5.
Yeah, I was gonna break it down into 5 and 5. So I'll read the first 5, and then they can come up, present the first 5, I'll read the second 5, and they can present and go that way. Old business, 23-15-A, OWPH Devco LLC, applicant requested dimensional variance from section 30714A1, billboards locations of the Monroeville zoning ordinance number 1443 as amended, to install a billboard that will encroach approximately 8 feet into the required 10-foot front yard setback. The property is a vacant lot on Old William Penn Highway, tax parcel 638D312 in the C2 Business Commercial Zoning District. All of these items had been tabled last month at the request of the applicant.
Understood.
Number 2, applicant requested dimensional variance from section 30714B, billboard size and height of the Monroeville zoning ordinance number 1443 as amended, to install a billboard that will exceed the 150 square foot maximum size of a billboard by 522 square feet per each side, for a total of 672 square feet per side. The property is a vacant lot on Old William Penn Highway, tax parcel 638D312 in the C2 Business Commercial Zoning District, and is a lot with 2 front yards. Number 3 of the first property, applicant requested dimensional variance from section 30714B2, billboard size and height of the Monroeville zoning ordinance number 1443 as amended, to install a billboard that will exceed the 10-foot by 15-foot maximum dimensions of a billboard by 4 feet and 33 feet respectively, for a total dimension of 14 feet by 48 feet per each side. Property is a vacant lot on Old William Penn Highway, tax parcel 638D312 in the C2 Business Commercial Zoning District, and is a lot with 2 front yards. Number 4, applicant requests a dimensional variance from section 30714B3, billboards, size and height of the Monroeville zoning ordinance number 1443 as amended, to install a billboard that will exceed the maximum height requirement of 24 feet above a roadway by 15 feet, for a total height of 39 feet for each side. The property is a vacant lot on Old William Penn Highway, tax parcel 638D312 in the C2 Business Commercial Zoning District, and is a lot with 2 front yards. And number 5 for the first property is 23-19A OWPH Devco LLC. Applicant requested dimensional variance from section 30714C1, billboards construction methods of the Monroeville zoning ordinance number 1443 as amended, to install a billboard that will exceed the 3-foot maximum diameter of a single vertical support by 0.5 feet, for a total diameter of 3.5 feet. The property is a vacant lot on Old William Penn Highway, tax parcel 638D312 in the C2 Business Commercial Zoning District, and is a lot with 2 front yards.
Thank you.
So that's the first 5.
First 5. Good evening.
Good evening.
You've signed in?
I have signed
State your
in, as
name,
have the other
please.
witnesses who I'm potentially calling this evening, and
What I think I'm going to do is, anybody that wants to speak for, against, or whatever, why don't we just, can we do a blanket swearing in? If you'd all stand and raise your right hand. In the matter before us, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you all. And Sharon, I'm sorry, did you give her your name, please?
He gave me his card, but please state your name.
Yes, my name is Stuart Gall. I'm with the law firm of Bernstein Berkeley. I am here this evening on behalf of OWPH Devco, which is, as you'll see, I was contracted to purchase the 2 lots that we're proposing to place the billboards on. I do actually have a number of exhibits. I don't know what the best way to present these to the board is. We have bound exhibit books that I could distribute to the board. There are a few of the exhibits that require a little more detailed work. We have blown-up ledger-sized copies of those, and we also have a PDF of the exhibit book loaded on the
If you're
screen.
going to present something, there's a mark on the table in front of you
Okay.
that they will pick it up on the overhead camera for the folks at home, and also folks here could watch in the monitor if you're going to reference something. If you want to pass something out to the board, you think it'll be helpful for us, I'm not sure we'll
All right.
through all that. It's
So
like-
before you start handing out, what is it that you're proposing to present?
What we're proposing to present are an aerial, which is similar to what you've seen before, but superimposes the survey on top of an aerial image of the site, a larger copy of the survey, a copy of the site plan. We have a few expert witnesses. We have CVs for those expert witnesses. We have a study on the speed on the I-376, which is the road toward which the billboards will be oriented. We have a analysis of what the buildable area of the lot is, both in terms of the slope and the waterways that are already on the property, and in terms of the yard requirements under the zoning ordinance. We have a sightline analysis that's been prepared by our civil and structural engineer that explains why the billboards need to be the size that they are and why they need to have the elevation that they do. We have in addition, we have a report from the traffic engineer not only about the speed on that part of the highway, but about the safety in the proximity, the other area of a static billboard that's also on 376 within Monroeville, and report on the anticipated safety in the proximity of this billboard. We do have a list of other PennDOT permitted billboards
So
in
you
Allegheny
have some
County.
packets there.
We do.
You've kind of outlined what's in the packet, is that what I
That-
understand?
But I think that covers everything, sir.
Okay. How many packets do you have?
We have packets for everyone on the board.
Okay, so why don't you pass those out? Make sure we'll mark that packet. It's your exhibit, so we'll just make it exhibit number 1.
That sounds great. And
Okay,
it's
so-
subdivided within it, and there are exhibits within
If
it.
you would, hand one to the court reporter and go ahead, hand it out to the 5 members of the board.
All right. Do you need one, Mr. Knight?
Yes. I need one more than anybody.
Thank you, sir.
If you have an extra one, Paul would love some reading.
I need more stuff.
You need more paper.
Stuart, are these in there, or are these just larger?
Sharon?
Exhibit 1, it's GAUL.
That's correct.
There's going to be a test, isn't there?
Thank you.
And we do, for some of the exhibits that started life in larger formats than letter paper, we do have copies of those as well. We have copies of the survey, the site plan, the hardship analysis, and the study on the sightlines that was prepared by the structural engineer.
Is that in here?
Those are in there. They're going to be difficult to read in there. These are going to be much easier for everybody to
Okay.
read.
Bring them on.
All right. And I believe they're marked with exhibit numbers in the lower left-hand corner.
So we'll make this exhibit number 2.
These are 2 in my hand right now. It's going to be a total of 4, so if you want to make them 2 through 5, that probably works.
Okay,
Actually, you know what?
you tell me.
Well, these actually already have numbers on them. They're a little out
Use
of
your
order.
numbers, whatever it is.
Yeah.
What is it?
They are you'll see there's a table of contents on the inside of the exhibit book. So these are going to be West 3, 4, 6, and 8.
Okay,
So,
it's your record, so you make it out any way you want.
Are these here, or is he going to show them?
I think he wants
He's
to.
going to pass some stuff out, but we're going to enter it into the record with those designations.
Okay, fine.
So you're handing her what right now?
I'm handing her 3 and 4,
3 and 4.
hoping that I have enough copies.
Thank you.
Like it might be
Somewhere
a
on
little
here it
light.
says 3 and 4.
The lower left-hand corner.
Yeah, lower bottom corner.
Okay, I see west.
On the side.
On the side.
West 3 and 4.
Where do you see it?
West 3,
Oh. Oh, Jesus.
West 4. Sorry.
It's the same as this
And
one.
it corresponds to the index on the second page of your packet.
Okay, just to be clear, there's no 2.
Not yet.
No. 2 is the agreement.
Okay,
Did you get a packet?
I do.
On the second page, there's an index, Sharon.
Uh-huh.
So he gave you 2 and 3.
Okay, I see it.
There may be, no.
Thank you.
There will. They're going to be 6, which is the hardship analysis, and 8, which is the sightline analysis.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Tell me what these numbers are again?
These are West 6 and West 8, and they're also going to correspond with the table of contents in our.
And what do these represent, these two?
Well, we'll explain them a little bit further, but Exhibit 6, you'll see as you look at it, is going to be the areas of this parcel that are actually buildable. On the first 3 pages, given the environmental constraints, given the floodplain and the slopes. And the last 2 pages of it, well, the 4th page is actually the yard requirements of the ordinance, and the last page is the combination of the 2 that shows the actual building.
That's number 6.
That's on number 6, that's right.
Multiple pages, yep.
And number 8, I think Natalis can be able to explain much better than I can, but it is the analysis, basically the first page is more of a location map. The second page is going to show how people approach it, given what the traffic engineer has told us about the speed as people approach this parcel on the I-376 side, on the Parkway side. And the last page is a combination of those, and in addition, it shows sort of a cross-section of the elevations. There's a small map, I think, in the middle on the left-hand side, that shows the elevation of the sign relative to the elevation of the hillsides on either side of the road. And
So when you reference west sign and east sign,
we do have 2 parcels here. The west sign is the it's where they are relative to 376.
okay, it's not on the east side of the parkway for
Yeah.
that, okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
they're not across, in fact, they are on the same side of the parkway. So they're both on the north side. So, yeah. So, as I think Mr. Gatos mentioned, Exhibit 2 is a copy of the agreement to purchase both of these parcels on behalf of OWPH. As I'm sure this board is used to seeing, the economic terms of that agreement are redacted, but it is an agreement. I am here today with Patrick Wolfington and Tim Earl, who are both the principals of OWPH. Michael Tantala, who is a licensed engineer in Pennsylvania and is a structural and civil engineer. Josh Hado, who is also a licensed engineer in Pennsylvania and is a traffic engineer, and A.J. Schwartz, who is a certified land planner, also in Pennsylvania. The original application package, if you have those, I think actually included 7 variances and a protest appeal. We've communicated with the municipality, with Mr. Weldon and the solicitor, and there's been an agreement that we don't need to proceed with those, so we are not. So we're simply here on the 5-dimensional variances. I'm not going to repeat those. Mr. Weldon has mentioned them. And this board is also very well aware of the 5-factor test, the elements of which we have to meet in order to obtain a dimensional variance. And we think through the testimony that we're going to offer this evening, we're going to prove that we are entitled to each of those, because this parcel is, as you've probably already noticed, very difficult to develop. It's sat idle for years and years and years. The billboards are in fact a conditional use within the C2 district, but the restrictions that the municipality and the zoning code places on billboards are too restrictive for anyone to actually build one in any commercially viable way on this site. And the site is not really usable for any of the other uses that are permitted either by right or as conditional uses in the C2 district. With that, I think it probably makes sense for me to call Mr. Tantala as a witness.
Would you, sir, sign in, please, and state your name and spell it for the reporter, please?
Yes, sir, I have signed in.
Okay,
My name is Michael Tantella, Tantala.
thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Tintella, you understand that OWPH is proposing to erect a sign on a property between Old William Penn Highway and the Parkway so that it can be viewed from the Parkway?
Yes, sir.
And if you have a copy of the exhibit book and can take a look at Exhibit 1. You can see that area and the light hash.
Yes, sir.
Is that the site we're discussing?
Yes, sir.
And am I right that you're here to testify about the construction and placement of the proposed billboard on the property and why OWPH needs and is entitled to the dimensional variances that is requesting for the sign?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us what you've done to prepare for your testimony today?
I've visited the site and surrounding areas. I reviewed the site survey and zoning site plan. I've performed various engineering analysis and calculations related to line of sight and traffic approach. I've reviewed the application and related materials, and I've prepared some exhibits.
When did you visit the site?
I was involved with this property since February. I visited the site today.
Did you do anything to familiarize yourself with the site prior to today?
Yes, sir.
Can you describe that?
I was provided photos in advance, videos driving along the route. I also mentioned I reviewed surveys, other engineering references related to PennDOT. I obtained topographic and what are called LiDAR point cloud data to understand the topography and the things that are on the surface and the relative elevations. And I reviewed regulations both locally and by the state.
And by locally, you mean the zoning ordinance?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did you have an opportunity to review any, or speed study for the property?
Yes, I also reviewed speed studies. I believe the engineer who's going to testify later will present those as well.
And the speed study that you reviewed, was this effectively a version of the document that's in our exhibit book as Exhibit 5?
Yes,
Okay, and that's dated today, you reviewed an earlier version of it?
I reviewed earlier versions and today's version.
And did anything in today's version change your conclusions?
No, sir.
Can you take a look at Exhibit, and let me ask you also about Exhibit 6. Our exhibit book. It's 5 pages long. Are you familiar, have you had an opportunity to review this exhibit before?
Yes, sir.
And how did you use it?
Hold up for a second.
I'm sorry.
How many exhibits are in here?
A total of 14.
In this?
In the
we've-
fat book,
we've-
yes.
We've
And
marked it as Exhibit 1.
That's-
Inside of that, there are 14 different exhibits.
would it make more sense if we marked the book itself as Exhibit A?
I haven't marked this at one.
Yeah, 1.
Okay, we'll stick with 1.
And inside Exhibit 1, there are 14 other exhibits. Is that what I'm
Right,
understanding?
which we actually marked as West 1, West 2, West 3, West 4, and I should be more specific about that going forward. I'm
Where
sorry.
is it marked? Oh, I see it, okay.
Yes. So,
Okay, down in the corner, though,
Mm-hmm.
West 1, 2, whatever, okay.
that's right. I'm sorry. So I will try to be careful to refer to them as West in the number in the future, so I apologize.
Okay, and what are we talking about now?
Right now, we're talking about West 6, which is 5 pages long, and it's in color. It's really the first,
Was it this?
It is.
Passed out here?
it is also, yes.
It'd be
Okay.
these sheets of prison.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Did you have an opportunity to review this as part of your Exhibit West 6 as part of your analysis?
Yes, sir.
May I interrupt for one moment? If you're going to reference, you're going to talk specifically about West 6, you could put that on the middle that we can get somebody to zoom in.
Why don't we, I think this is actually on the X, and we can go
Okay.
page by page.
Give them a moment to
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
focus here.
As you look through West 6, that was also a document that you considered?
Yes, sir.
And how did it weigh into your consideration?
West 6 is identified as a hardship analysis for this location. So using the survey as a base, it established constraints and challenges with the site in terms of hardship for development relative to slopes, floodway, floodplain, and setback requirements.
Take a look at West 7 now. I'm going to ask if that's a document you recognize.
Yes, sir, that's my curriculum vitae.
Okay. Let's use it and talk a little bit about your qualifications to talk about engineering and placement of signs. Do you have an educational background in engineering?
Yes, sir.
Can you describe that for the board?
Yes, I obtained my Bachelor of Science in Engineering from the University of Pennsylvania. I obtained my Master's of Science in Engineering from Princeton University. I've also obtained a Master of Arts from Princeton University. That's my educational background. Subsequent to that, I'm a professional engineer in private practice. In my family firm, which has been established since 1966. I've been with Tantella Associates LLC, engineers and architects, for more than 20 years. I'm a licensed professional engineer by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I'm currently licensed in 10 states and practice in 10 states.
How long have you been a licensed professional engineer in Pennsylvania?
Approximately 17 years.
Do you regularly engineer and design off-premises advertising signs?
Yes, sir.
How many times have you done that?
Hundreds.
Have you engineered and designed signs that have been primary uses on parcels of land?
Yes, sir.
And have you done that with signs that have been accessory uses?
Yes, sir.
How long have you been doing that?
Over 20 years. I've been involved with the structural, geotechnical, site civil, and transportation aspects related to engineering and the development of these types of signs. As part of my practice, I have been involved professionally with the design, engineering development, line of sight analysis, lighting, traffic studies, inspection, feasibility, and other safety concerns. I've done this work in excess of 20 years. I've testified in more than 25 states across the country, specifically about signage as it relates to these aspects of engineering.
Does this work often involve the consideration of zoning ordinances?
Yes, and I regularly prepare zoning site plans myself. This requires consideration of these ordinances and their controls.
Does this background and experience help you to determine the height necessary for a billboard to be safely viewable by motorists on a roadway?
Yes, it does.
Does this background and experience help you to determine the size or sign area necessary for a billboard to be safely viewable by a motorist traveling on a roadway?
Yes, it does.
Can you explain how, briefly?
Yes. When we look at the installation of a sign, a good sign is one that can be easily read if the driver chooses to read it. And that relates, sign visibility generally relates to legibility and conspicuity. Is it readable, legible? Is it conspicuous? Can be noticed at a distance? So engineering parameters come into an analysis related to this. Can you see it? If you're on the road, how far over is the sign? How high up is the sign? How much time will your eyes spend looking over and taking glances at that sign, or looking up to take glances at that sign? We also take into effect the speed of the road, because that affects the amount of time the driver has to reasonably read the sign. So their experience is at a distance, they notice a sign is at a distance, but they can't read it. They cue in their mind that they want to read it as they get closer. As they get closer, they're afforded enough time to read it. And as that sign falls within a central cone of vision, so that they don't have to take their eyes off the road significantly, we can actually calculate all these parameters. That's one aspect of speed, setback, height, and size. Can you read it far enough? Another aspect has to do with the topography and its surrounding environment. So when we cite a sign, we want to avoid visual obstructions. So is it high enough to clear directional signage? Is it, if there's topography, is it high enough that the driver can read it at the distances in advance that they need to, so that they can drive safely, read the sign if they choose to read it, and move on their merry way?
Have you ever published anything concerning the development or engineering of signs?
Yes, sir.
On how many occasions?
I've published with the Transportation Research Board of the National Academies twice. I've published with the Institute of Transportation Engineers. I've also published with the United States Sign Council more than twice. And on the industry side, I've published with the Foundation for Outdoor Advertising, Research, and Education numerous times, specifically about signage, specifically about this type of signage, its effective placement on the roadway, and specifically about safety and its operation.
And are your publications listed in the CV that we've looked at as Exhibit West 7?
Yes, sir, they are.
So to the extent the board would like to review those, that's available for them to do so.
Yes, sir.
At this time, we'd offer Mr. Tantella as an expert in civil engineering and billboard signage.
Okay, proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take a look at the survey again, which I think is West 3. And
Yes, sir.
I'm going to represent to you that this is a survey plan that was prepared by the HF Lens Company, and it's dated March 13th of this year. Is this the type of document on which you ordinarily rely in doing your analyses?
Yes, sir.
What allows you to treat it as reliable?
It's prepared by a design professional. It's sealed by an engineer by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, where these signs are proposed. And it relates, in this case, topography, site features, relative information about the route, and meets and bounds of the parcel.
Are there any features on this property that are unusual?
Yes,
Could you describe them for the board?
yes. First, it's an oddly shaped parcel. It's longer than it is tall, essentially, as we look at it on plan. The parcel is narrow. It's generally about 100 feet, a little less on the west side, by 600 feet long. This parcel is north of I-376. Other features about this parcel, it has two frontages, so there's frontage along I-376. There's also frontage along Old William Penn Highway. The parcel is also bisected by Leak Run. It's bisected along its longitude. Leak Run's identified here. And that bisected area, it also includes with that run FEMA's regulatory floodway, which is identified along these boundaries here, and also the FEMA floodplain. So of this parcel, the FEMA regulatory floodway occupies about 37%, 0.497 acres. The FEMA floodplain occupies about half, about 0.672 acres. Other features of this site are identified in color. It has extreme topography. There are steep slopes, so the green areas here represent steep slopes between 25 and 35%. This green area represents approximately 1.9% of the total property area. The red indicates areas with greater than 35% slope, and that area occupies approximately 47.2% of the property area. Other challenges and constraints with this site include PennDOT slope easements. The PennDOT slope easements accommodate the structural and other features related to the right-of-way of I-376, and these slope easements are indicated here in these dashed lines, and they're identified as the words "limit of slope." So they are part of the property, but they are easements or restrictions on the property by PennDOT. Those easements constitute 18.8% of the property, or equivalently approximately 0.252 acres. There are also stormwater features on the site. At 2 points, I-376 discharges stormwater directly onto the property here and here. This is a RCP, reinforced concrete pipe, but they discharge stormwater onto the property. There's also a sanitary easement at the west end, and there are other constraints with this property that because I-376 is limited access, there's no access from the south side of the property. There currently is no access from the north side of the property along Old William Penn Highway. The elevation and topography changes significantly as well.
Do these features present obstacles to development of this property?
In my professional opinion, yes.
How?
Easements, by their nature, restrict the development of the site. The steep slopes are an issue. The floodway is regulatory controls. It cannot be developed. And that includes, the areas I've previously identified. The significant changes in elevation limit the development of the site. I would also mention, in addition to the discharge points, their utilities along Old William Penn Highway that includes aerial electric lines. So these are physical and easement constraints that limit it simply because it diminishes the amount of area to develop.
We can take a quick look at Exhibit 6, and particularly the last page of Exhibit 6. And for the board, that's one of the larger format documents that you have. Or actually, if we could walk through Exhibit 6. First of all, did you prepare this exhibit?
No, sir, I did not.
Okay. But you've reviewed it?
Yes, sir, I have.
If we could just quickly explain for the board your understanding, and we'll talk to the person who developed it later on, but if you could just quickly to explain to the board your understanding of the first 3 pages of this document.
The first 3 pages of this document represent, in color format, some of these controls that I previously mentioned, the steep slopes, the floodplain, the floodway, the body of water itself. It includes the survey as a base, but these areas have been further clarified by color. And it includes new information about available areas for development and imposes the limits set forth by the minimum yard requirements and building setback requirements. So it establishes a number of areas in white that are available areas for consideration. And as you walk through this exhibit, there are different examples that sort of separated out at the next page of Exhibit 4, or 6.
Exhibit West 6. yes.
Exhibit West 6 shows just the floodplain The next page of Exhibit 6 shows just the slopes.
And we can stop there for the moment. So, do you understand how this parcel took its current form?
Yes, it was born out of 1960s condemnation of portions of the parcel to accommodate I-376.
What's the basis of that understanding?
The, well, the fact that it abuts and is adjacent to I-376, PennDOT condemnation records, PennDOT right-of-way drawings, and other similar references. The survey itself documents that as well.
In your experience, is this parcel a lot that anyone would plan?
In my professional opinion, no.
Let me ask you, I think we talked earlier about OWPH's plan to construct a billboard on the property.
Yes, sir.
If you can take a look at Exhibit West 4, which is the site plan.
Yes, sir.
Are you able to point out for the board where the billboard would be located on the parcel?
Yes, sir. The billboard is going to be located, or is proposed to be located directly here. Again, similar orientation, I-376 to the south, Old William Penn Highway to the north. This shows the location of the billboard relative to both the property lines and relative to the stream area. And it references it as a distance approximately on its south point, 187.1 feet east of the west property line.
Is there anything else on this site plan that OWPH is proposing to construct on the parcel?
Yes, in addition to this billboard, which is a monopole structure with two faces set in a V orientation, they're also proposing to build a culvert stream crossing. There's a permanent crossing and a temporary one with that. And in addition to that, and related to that, are some minor grading to accommodate the slopes of those proposed access. Also related to that is access from Old William Penn Highway to the north to get across Leak Run to access, build, and maintain the sign.
How is the property currently zoned?
Property is currently zoned C2 business use per the zoning site plan, per the zoning map.
And is a billboard a permitted use in a C2 district?
Yes, sir.
As a permitted use, or?
It's by conditional use under section 359-11, table 201. C permits boards by conditional use in the C2 district.
And are you familiar with the dimensional requirements for the C2 district under the zoning ordinance?
Yes, sir. Section 359-14, table 201C also contains the minimum yard and setback requirements for a use in the C2 district.
Okay. And have you reviewed that section and table 201C of the zoning ordinance?
Yes, sir, I have.
And are you aware of the section of the zoning code that provides the regulations for the conditional use of billboard?
Yes, sir.
That's section 359-270 of the code?
Of the ordinance, yes, sir.
Have you reviewed that section?
Yes, sir.
Let's take another look. Let's go back, if we can, to Exhibit West 6, which was the hardship analysis. I'm going to ask you to take a look at page 4 of that page 4 of that document. and ask if you can explain to the board what you understand that diagram to be.
This, page 4 of Exhibit West 6 shows the area that shows the minimum yard requirement, the building setback requirement lines, and it identifies the area contained within those of the lot, namely the area that satisfies yard requirements and the area that satisfies building and yard requirements. So it defines the area relative to these controls in the ordinance. So as you can see, there's a smaller area on the inside that satisfies both requirements, and then this area outside that is just yard requirements.
Okay, if you can take a look at page 5 of Exhibit West 6,
Yes, sir.
and can you explain to us your understanding of that section?
So when we combine the areas relative to the physical constraints of the site, which I testified and showed through the first page of this exhibit, and we combine that with the ordinance requirements for setback, we can look at the common areas that overlay, and this demonstrates the remaining areas for both that satisfy yard requirements and natural limitations, and areas that are remaining that satisfy both building setback and natural limitations.
And for the benefit of the board, can you
So
point?
I understand, is that the pink areas?
Yes, sir. They're two shades of pink, it appears. The areas are tabulated with a table here, and they are the pink areas as designated, but they're two flavors of pink.
Sir, on section, where the little 6, number 6, is that the one that satisfies the,
Yes, sir.
okay, that's the only,
That is the only darker pink. That area 6 has an area of 87.83 square feet. It's approximately 0.15% of the total property area available that satisfies both those requirements that are part of the overlay of what's remaining as you peel away both these physical constraints.
building and,
What are these other pink?
So the first one has a combined area of 4,900 square feet. That is the remaining area that satisfies yard requirements and natural limitations. As I mentioned on the previous page, it's not just the yard requirements, it's also the building setback requirements. So this is showing you both flavors of limitation. If I were to go back one page, remember, there is a yard requirement and a setback requirement for building setback. So if we were to take these areas and as areas that are available and subtract out all the prior physical features, the floodplain, the slope, the easements, and so forth, these are the areas that would remain.
When you say they remain, what does that mean? Does that mean that you could build something on it?
These are open areas that are available based on these constraints.
Okay, so try to answer my question. Does that mean that you could build something on the areas that are located in pink?
Mr. Dice, could I interrupt? Mr. Schwartz will explain it a little more fully when
Well,
he
he's
testifies.
up here now, and he's
He
doing
is,
this.
he is absolutely up here. I think I can short-circuit your question. You're free to have him answer.
Well, I want to
if
hear
he
what
has-
he has to say
Sure.
about it. I mean,
Okay.
I want to know, when I'm looking at this exhibit here, and I think it's the last page,
Yes, sir.
it's got a bunch of pink places.
These are, yes, these are,
My question is,
yes, sir.
these pink places are put on here to demonstrate that there could be something built there? Is that, am I right?
They're
Or
to,
wrong?
they're to demonstrate areas that are remaining that satisfy the respective requirements listed. Whether it's buildable or not, I believe it's not, because they're such small areas. But that's for the planner to discuss.
Okay, let's keep going, let's get you through this, and then I'll have some questions.
Okay. Do you have an understanding of the relief that OWPH is seeking from the C2 district requirements and the billboard regulations?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And to your understanding, those are reflected in the billboard applications and the information that Mr. Weldon read at the beginning of the meeting?
Yes, sir.
If we could just go through those one at a time. Do you understand the nature of the variance that we're requesting from the minimum front yard requirement?
Yes, sir.
And can you explain that for the board?
The section 359-14 for a C2 district, minimum front yard, 10 feet is required. What is provided or proposed here are 2 feet.
And section
So
350,
10 feet to 2 feet.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
and the section 359-27.0 includes requirements for billboard size and height. Are we seeking variances from those?
Yes, sir. For area, 150 square feet is permitted, 672 square feet is proposed.
So you want to take it from 150 to 672?
Yes, sir. Also, for sign face dimensions, height and width are limited. 10 by 15 sign is permitted, a 14 by 48 is proposed. So 14 feet high face by 48 feet wide face is proposed. And I believe you mentioned height as well. It's limited to 24 feet above the roadway. That's what's permitted. What is provided or proposed is 39 feet.
Okay. And as to construction of the billboard, are we also seeking a variance on the requirements of section 359-2703?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain that for the board?
The maximum diameter of a single vertical support is limited to 3 feet permitted. What is proposed is 3.5 feet, 3.5 feet.
Let's go through the variances and explain why they're needed. And as part of doing that, you might want to take a look at Exhibit 8 and explain for the board what Exhibit 8 is. It's a document that the board also has in large format. It should be in there.
What's this thing?
That's West.
Yep.
Did you prepare this document, Exhibit West 8?
Yes, sir.
How did you prepare it?
I prepared it from photos. I prepared it using information from the survey and from point cloud information, also information from PennDOT about the route. I prepared it by calculation, determining distances, travel times, angles, and line of sight sections.
Okay. And did you use the speed study that we mentioned earlier?
I also used the Worcester speed study, which the posted speed limit here is 55 miles per hour, and that speed study identified higher than posted speed observed. For this site, 71 miles per hour was
That's generous.
measured.
Very generous.
Okay. And can you, let's go page by page, if you can explain what's in here for the board.
Sure. This first page of West 8 It is, just shows you in each direction, the westbound view at the top, and this is at a distance of approximately 800 feet in advance of the proposed location of the sign. So this is westbound travel. The sign would be to the north of I-376. Here below shows an eastbound view, and this, again, is 800 feet west of the sign, and this is what we would call a cross read, because drivers headed eastbound on I-376 would look over cross traffic. And I've identified here just certain features. There's a directional sign at a distance and a variable message PennDOT digital display sign at a distance. I've identified their elevations, and later pages of this exhibit will show where the sign is proposed and its elevation relative to other features in the vicinity of this location.
You can briefly explain to the board what's on the second page of Exhibit West 8.
Sir, can I ask a question before you
Yes,
get
sir.
that? On this top photograph,
Yes, sir.
can you approximately point out in this photo where the, I guess, the light pole or the pole would be going? Just approximate to give us a visual.
Yes, so on the top, it'd be generally around here.
Hey, hang on one second till we
Yeah,
get
till I
back
get the
on the
overhead.
screen. Yeah,
Oh,
thank
okay.
you.
Generally around here, which is beyond this property's fence line. On the eastbound side, it would be generally about here, and it'll be more clear on the next exhibits.
Thanks.
One other question for me. When were these photos taken?
These are Google Earth, or Google photos. They were taken within the last 3 years.
Okay.
Is that accurate, or is this for the, because that's the old Water Authority building.
This is 800 feet in advance of it, so
Okay, west side, correct.
in each direction.
So the way I was describing it earlier to them for location was it would be approximately directly across from the old Water Authority building, which you can see in that image.
Yes. That's a fair assessment, but it's further down. And I'll show with a little more context, rather than direct photos, I'll show aerials.
Want to show the board what's on the second page?
Yes. So as part of an analysis of where a sign is sited, and I apologize, this is a little light here, the middle part of this exhibit is a horizontal or plan view, and the sign is shown at the center. So when I do an analysis to determine if a sign falls within a good cone of vision from either westbound traffic or eastbound traffic, I determine the center of those lanes. These are 3 lanes in each direction. And then I determine distances in advance of those and how far a driver would have to look over. So these are just points along I-376. I'll take this as an example for the westbound direction. This is approximately 12 seconds before the sign, 10 seconds before the sign, 8 seconds before the sign, 6 seconds before the sign, and equivalently those approximate distances. And the same for the opposite, again, what I call the cross read for eastbound traffic. What are these approach times and equivalent distances?
Is that for the 70 miles an hour or posted 55?
This was calculated for the, this was updated for the 70 miles per hour, 71 miles per hour per the speed study. When I did it originally, I did it per the posted speed limit, but these are adjusted. So what this figure demonstrates horizontally how far over does a driver have to look? And as these angles, as they're driving, they notice the sign at a distance. They're afforded time to read the sign. At one point, they're too close to the sign to be able to read it, and another point, they're past the sign. So this tabulates the line of sight angles horizontally in each direction. And then I've done that vertically because we know information about the road relative to its slope and its elevations. If I'm a driver going along vertically, what does that look like, and how far up do they have to glance? This sign is at a low point relative to the road, and they generally have to look between 1.5 to 3.7 degrees, depending on direction. From a traffic perspective, we generally try to sight these signs. As I said, the experience is you don't want to look too far over, too far up. Generally, we want to be within that 10-degree range, 15-degree range horizontally, 10-degree range vertically, and this satisfies those criteria. And they're recapped for each direction in terms of those angles, viewer reaction distances, and viewer reaction times is listed.
So on this graph, if we're looking towards the right-hand side, the dotted line we're saying, going straight across, that's the roadway itself, going westbound, and then the one that's underneath would be coming eastbound.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
That's correct. So this is part of a traffic analysis to site it accurately, again, so that they can see at a distance that there's a sign, cue in their mind that they want to read it as they get closer. When they get within a certain range, it's a legible sign that they can read. We want to afford them enough time to be able to read that sign at the speeds that are either posted or the speeds they're traveling per the traffic study. The other thing that I mentioned, which is the next page, has to do with line of sight analysis relative to are there any obstructions? So for this part of the exhibit, we're concerned about the west sign. What's shown here on the top is a orthographic view of a point cloud. So this point cloud records elevations of topography, grade, trees, guardrails. It's a fine resolution point cloud that gives me information about every elevation of every feature along this stretch of I-376 plus some. Knowing that information, I can develop a line of sight. So for instance, if I'm a driver headed eastbound and I'm looking at that cross read to this proposed west sign, I could make a section cut from the driver's eye to the sign and see what things may fall in this profile. And that's what this line of sight, B to B, represents for eastbound traffic going from 10 seconds to the sign. So this is every elevation of a section cut along there, and I've shown the proposed sign B in blue here. It's identified as west sign. It has a top of elevation and a bottom of elevation of the top of face and the bottom of face. So a driver here, this is the road elevation plus 3.5 feet is their eye. And if we draw this red line of sight, this LOS, line of sight BB, from the driver's eye at 10 seconds to the center of the face, we note that there are certain obstructions. The directional sign, which was identified here as part of my earlier exhibit in a larger view, we just clear that directional sign by setting this billboard face at this height. Any less, the portion of the billboard face would be blocked. Any more, there'd be some more clear distance between the bottom of face. So this is optimally designed to accommodate the approach and the elevations. There are other features that are caught in that section, a light standard, which is much higher, but it doesn't obstruct the view. That's what this center section shows on this exhibit. Similarly, to get sort of a cross view, I've also developed a profile, what I'm calling profile AA along the west sign, and this gives you all the elevations of all the features along I-376. You know, westbound is closest to the sign, eastbound is where this 10-second read was coming from. You can also see that Old William Penn Highway is at a lower elevation. There's a number of large trees on either side, and I've taken it to extremes beyond to give relative elevations along Sunnyfield Drive and Earth Ridge Drive, just to give a sense. This really is a low point in the along here. Even in this point cloud, you can note some of the features that I was talking about earlier. There's utility poles that have certain elevations. But generally, with this kind of section, we can see that the sign falls into a valley, per se, both topographically and relative to the various tree heights. To one side, the top of tree is at an elevation of about 1,100 feet, 1,101, and the top of face is at 968. To the other side, those tree heights are 1048. So it gives a good representation of the heights of all these features in the vicinity of this proposed west sign, and that it's properly sited to clear a visual obstruction and no more.
Mr. Tantello, these are ideals that your client is seeking, right? This would be in an ideal world, this is how you would propose to set your height of the sign and the size of the sign
This
for
is
maximum exposure.
This is relative to engineering analysis. So I cite these typically, I determine what's a good height relative to all these things. So a lot of times, clients do not have the information of, perfect knowledge about all the topography, perfect knowledge about what the relative elevation of directional signage and other things may be that could be an obstruction. So in one hand, I drive the location to get a sense, I look at videos and photos. In another hand, I develop this full 3D model with collected data to actually calculate the minimal height to clear this directional sign for this line of sight.
So this study came first, and then from there, it was determined, let's say, using the height of the sign at 39 foot is the request from the developer.
Yes, I did this study earlier in the year, much earlier in the year, and they came to me with the question of, if we set the sign at a certain height, is it going to be blocked or not? So to answer those questions, I use the math and the collected survey data to set it precisely.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about the work that you've done and Exhibit West 8 in the context of the variances for which OWPH is asking. Are you generally familiar with the variance standards under the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code?
Yes, sir.
And you understand those to be the same as the standards for a variance under the Monroeville zoning code?
Yes, sir.
So let's go through them, and I think this is something that Mr. Grziak was thinking about. First of all, let's talk about the setback, which is, we're requesting a variance from 10 feet to 2 feet. First of all, let me ask, do zoning ordinances typically contain different or different setback requirements for buildings as opposed to other improvements on a property?
Yes, that's why there's a building line setback.
Okay. Would placing the sign 2 feet away from the property line give effective relief to OWPH, and would it make the sign viable on this parcel?
Yes, 2 feet, in my professional opinion, would make the sign viable. As I previously testified, a good sign is one that can be easily read by the driver so they don't have to take their eyes off the road or take their eyes too high from the road. It has to fall in a central cone of vision for the speeds and distances that are part of it. At the same time, there's topography and elevation to set that sign, relative to the grade, relative to the route grade, but 2 feet is appropriate because it sets that sign closer to the road and closer to their central cone of vision.
Would there be shortcomings that would prevent building the sign with 10 feet or some setback larger than 2 feet?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain those for the board?
So, again, the driver experience is you notice it at a distance. As you get closer, you take furtive glances, and you want to minimize that glance time, eyes off the road. Those limitations, if you place it further back, to be able to be seen and to be read and afford more time to the driver, the sign would have to be larger or higher. So as you go further out of that cone of vision, further from their central view, it means more time to look at that sign and more time to glance at that sign. So to compensate for that, if you were to go further back, the sign would have to be larger to accommodate its larger setback from the road. Here in this location, the sign is already just set back by the nature of how the road is. The property line is approximately 44 feet from the edge of the road. So it has a generous setback already. To go further from that would increase the requirements for the size of the sign for a good driver experience.
Okay. And by good, are we including safe in that?
Safe and appropriate.
Okay. Let's deal with the two-dimensional issues together if we can. Would this site be appropriate for a billboard that was 10 feet by 15 feet or 150 square feet?
In my professional opinion, no.
Can you explain why not?
This I-376 is 3 lanes in each direction. There's additional demands on drivers. It's a high posted speed, 55 miles per hour. It's a high measured speed, what we typically call 85th percentile speeds, that drivers drive at faster speeds than the posted speed limit. So when you have faster moving drivers in a complex road environment, you want a larger, from a traffic engineering perspective, you want enough time for that driver to be able to read those signs. So if it were a lower speed road, a local road, 25 miles per hour, that may be appropriate, more appropriate for those speeds because drivers would be driving more slowly, have more time to engage with that sign if they choose to. And that's why PennDOT permits these signs to be up to 1,200 square feet, particularly for higher speeds. In determining their regulations, speed is a central focus because speed relates travel time, travel distance, what we typically call viewer reaction time and viewer reaction distances. And we actually calculate, do they have enough time to read that sign in addition to looking over and looking up to see it?
Okay, so 150 square feet wouldn't work. Why do we need 672 square feet or 14 by 48?
For the reasons I previously stated, because it's a higher speed road that it advertises to. And it's not, implicit with that speed is, them noticing it at a distance. So again, we plan for this 10 seconds out. We look at the relative elevations, the clear line of sight, and then we calculate the amount of time as they approach. So that is a reason to have that sign of that size. Again, PennDOT permits almost double that sign, particularly for higher speed routes and interstates like this.
Could we put this sign at 24 feet above the roadway?
In my professional opinion, no. This lot, as I've testified, has extreme topography. The sign has to be a certain height just to get at road elevation, and then it has to be a little bit higher to overcome the heights of cross-traffic, overcome the directional sign that's in its way, and be high enough to be read at a distance further upstream eastbound and further upstream westbound. So when we take into account those distances, the sign has to meet a certain threshold in height just to get above or at grade level. And that's still not enough because cars have to be able to see over other cars, and it has to be high enough to be read at distances. And that's all implicit with these calculations that demonstrate that the line of sight just eclipses the top of that directional sign and is appropriate with where it's sited, vertically speaking.
So I think you may just have touched on this. Why does it need to be 39 feet high rather than some other height between 24 and 39 feet?
For reasons previously stated, it has to overcome the lower topography of where it's sited, and this basin is a basin within a larger area that is a bit of a valley. It also has to overcome vegetation, directional signage, and be at an appropriate height so that it can be read or noticed at a start, read along the way, and be effective and safe, so it's not obstructed, so that when a driver gets close, it's not obscured and they can see it as they get closer to it. This is the height, the minimal height, in my professional opinion, that would accommodate that.
And the last variance is a little different, but let's talk about that for a minute. Why do we need to have, since this is a monopole construction, why do we need to have a monopole that's 3.5 feet in diameter?
There are two main reasons, and they're all tied together: the setback, the size, the height, and it stems right into the upright. So this is a single pole sign structure. It's a monopole. Its height's determined by lines of sight and traffic analysis. There are other constraints upon that make sense to make this a 3.5-foot diameter pole. Number one, because it reaches a certain height, this sign, although it's proposed to be 39 feet above I-376 that it's adjacent to, this sign, relative to its local grade, is proposed to be 53 feet to top. So that difference is just overcoming the lower topography where the pole meets the ground. When you have a sign length of that, sign height of that length, the poles are often sleeved in or spliced together, so they can't transport large poles without having sections to telescope up to that height. That's one reason. Another reason is because of the height of this sign and its size, there are load requirements that it is designed. Like any other structure, it has to meet building code load requirements. Those are established by the American Society of Civil Engineers Standard 7, which sets minimum load requirements for wind, earthquake, dead load, self-weight, other things. So for a size of this height, 3.5-foot diameter would be the minimum diameter to meet those requirements, in addition to the fact that it's sleeving in another pole that's an appropriate diameter for structural reasons and for feasibility reasons of how it's built.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the other variance requirements and if there's any distinction on these among the 5 variances that we're talking about. Please feel free to mention that. Obviously, the first and second variance requirements, the first relates to whether there are unique physical circumstances or conditions on the property, and there is a hardship that is created by those conditions and not generally created by the zoning code. Is that applicable? Do you believe that's satisfied for the ordinance requests here, or, I'm sorry, the variance requests here?
Yes, as testified and demonstrated through these exhibits, there is a hardship here.
Okay. And I know we've covered this in some detail, but could you very briefly explain what that is for the board?
The developable area the extreme topography, the frontages on 2 roads that require setbacks, the floodplain, floodway, the slope requirements, steep slope requirements, the various easements on this site, the utilities that discharge stormwater from 376, as well as the other aerial utility easements that are further set back. All of these constraints constitute a hardship. I believe the planner will further clarify that through their analysis as well.
Okay, and do those hardship, or do those circumstances prevent building a billboard in strict compliance with the zoning code?
Yes, and that's why variances are requested.
Okay. Could you summarize that just a little bit further?
So in terms of the variances requested, as I've testified, for the lot and yard requirements, it has to be close to the road, 2 feet is provided. The maximum area of the sign has to be appropriate for this high-speed road, 672 square feet is, relief is requested. The face dimensions accordingly have to have a size large enough that can be read at those distances and those speeds. The heights above the roadway, I talked about the relative lower topography that it first has to overcome before it does its job of being a sign that can be read if a driver chooses to read it. And the maximum diameter, I talked about those being related to the height and the relative elevations and the driver's experience as well.
Okay, let's talk about the third requirement for variance. Have any of these hardships been created in any way of which you are aware by OWPH?
No.
No. Okay. Do you know whether they were created by the previous owner?
No, I believe they were created primarily based on topography and based on the condemnation associated with I-376 and the other features that I've detailed.
Okay. Am I correct that all the relief that we're requesting here is dimensional in nature rather than a use variance?
Yes, sir.
The last two, or the fourth requirement is that the variance will not alter the character of the neighborhood, impair the use or development of adjacent property, and isn't detrimental to the public welfare. Have you had a chance to understand or to learn about the neighborhood in which the sign would be, the area in which the sign would be located?
Yes, sir.
Can you summarize for the board what you've learned?
So as part of my analysis, again, I've driven I-376. I've also visited the developments to the north, namely Sunnyfield Drive and Firethorn Drive, and to the south, Eagle Ridge, to see if there's any visibility there. I've also done this numerically by calculation to show that this sign is at a low point relative to the elevations, and it's well buffered with the trees, topography, and other features to shield this sign. Additionally, the sign itself is oriented to advertise to I-376. It's a V-shaped sign so that it physically orients the faces to the road. There are a number of other features that, will be protection associated with this sign. It's a digital display. It displays a static message proposed for 8 seconds, and then it changes to the next static message. It meets the controls of PennDOT. There's no animation or anything like that. Its brightness and illumination is strictly controlled. There's a photo cell on the sign so that it adjusts the ambient light associated with that static message throughout the day. So on a cloudy day, it dims. On a sunny day, it compensates. Furthermore, this proposed digital face is a special type that's proposed that is more restrictive than typical digital faces. It's it cuts off any spillage of light beyond a certain degree. So your conventional sign would have an external light fixture that would bounce light in all directions. A digital sign, because it's made up of LEDs, directionally limits the amount of light to the road at which it's principally advertised. This sign has additional features that are part and around the LEDs that constrict how much of that light goes side to side. So as you stand oblique from these sign faces, they get dimmer and dimmer, and at a certain angle, they cut off completely so that you can't see the message if you're standing oblique to the sign. This type of technology has an extra feature beyond your traditional digital sign that cuts those angles off significantly more, so that it efficiently directs the light to the sign and it doesn't spill much beyond the footprint that's necessary.
How much more do you have with this witness?
I don't have a lot more with this witness.
Okay, because I'm worried about my court reporter.
Yeah. I'm okay.
Okay.
All right. We'll take a break after he's finished.
Yes, that's what I'm trying for.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me ask, you mentioned light control side to side. Does this type of sign have control the flow of light above the sign?
Yes, so there's a certain footprint, we call it a light footprint, that the sign puts out horizontally. It also has lower angles that it puts out vertically. The LEDs and its technology actually orient the light to favor the road rather than up. This light blocking technology constrains horizontal directions of the light and vertical directions of the light to better restrict it, so it's got to go directly to the road.
Just
and
so
not
we
much more beyond
understand,
that.
I mean, a lot of this stuff goes to whether or not you're going to get a conditional use approved by the municipality. We don't grant conditional uses. Municipality grants conditional uses. So, I mean, I don't know, a lot of this language that you're speaking to us about has to do with whether or not a conditional use should be granted and what the conditions might be. You know, I want you to focus on the 5 aspects of variance. I think that's where we want to, I don't care about light.
Yes, sir.
You know, that's something the municipality might be concerned about. So,
Okay, we can move along, Mr. Dice. I was just a little concerned coming in about the board's potential concern about impact on the community, and we wanted to address that to the extent that we could.
okay, well,
But we'll be happy to move along. So, I think, and frankly, the last point on this is that that the variances or variance requested is the minimal relief necessary. I think we've touched on that already, but is there anything more you'd want to say on that subject?
Yes, in my professional opinion, the relief requested is the minimum amount to permit a billboard safely and visibly at this location for these speeds, the sign face, height, setback, column size, they're all related to one another. By the math, by my driven experience, all the references, this is an appropriate size, height, setback, and face size for this proposed installation.
And the opinions that you've expressed here, do you hold those to a reasonable degree of professional certainty as a licensed engineer and a structural and civil engineer?
Yes, sir.
Those are the questions I have for now. Thank you.
okay, just a couple questions. Back to this exhibit. I think it's, I don't know what your number is.
Last page
That's
is
West
6.
Sixth, yeah.
These areas that are in pink, what do they represent, those pink areas?
They're identified in the table.
Will you just tell me?
They're the remaining area that if you look at all the yard requirements and natural limitations, or all the building setbacks and natural limitations. So they're basically superimposing natural limitations, which I've discussed from the survey and shown in earlier pages of this exhibit, and overlaying the yard and building setback requirements and seeing what's left in those perfect little areas.
Have you reviewed the zoning ordinance and the C2 uses?
Yes.
do you know whether or not a C2 use could be put in one of these pink areas?
I believe the planner's going to testify to that, but I believe the areas are too small to accommodate that. There's no access, for all the other reasons I mentioned.
Everything that you've discussed here tonight has been told to the future owner, right, the applicant tonight? You've discussed this with them.
Yes, sir, I and other experts.
Okay. And they haven't bought this property yet. It's under an agreement of sale of sorts?
I'll let them testify to that.
I mean, that's
I
what I
believe that's
understand.
correct. Yeah, we'll clarify that later on.
Okay. So they know about all these limitations before they purchase it?
That's a question for them, sir, and I believe they're going to
Well, have you
testify.
explained it to them, these limitations, like you've explained it to us?
Yes, sir. All these documents document it. They've been provided to the owner as well.
And it's your testimony then that there can't be any C2 use that's in our zoning ordinance that can be put on this property?
Yes, and I'll let the planner also clarify that, because these are their exhibits.
Well,
They're
I
here
understand you
tonight.
got a planner.
But that's my,
I want to hear what you have to say.
that is my professional opinion, yes, sir.
Okay. That's all I have.
Are we appropriate to take a 5-minute break,
Okay.
just to get a stretch and a
Certainly from
trip
our
to the
perspective,
restroom?
sir.
Thank you, Mr. Tantella.
Thank you.
We're in recess for 5 minutes. We're back in session.
We're back in session, okay. Housekeeping matter. We're going to go till 10 o'clock tonight,
Okay,
and then we'll set you again up for next month to have another go at it, whatever it is. I don't know how many witnesses you have.
we have essentially the same 4 witnesses on both sets of applications.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
Let me just ask, is there anybody from the community here, any residents that are looking to talk or speak? Just out of curiosity.
okay,
No?
done.
Okay.
So let the record reflect there's no witnesses. Paul, would you ask the questions that you've just told me about?
So, given all the testimony, would it be possible to build a billboard on this site in compliance with the ordinance? Might not be optimal as per what you want and have designed, but could you build a billboard
Could
in
it physically
compliance?
be done?
As I've testified, it's not appropriate to have the smaller size area for these speeds. So I would not design that or build it.
Okay, I
You wouldn't
understand you
recommend
would.
it, but it could be built.
Professionally, I wouldn't recommend it, but you could build, I imagine anything.
Physically, could it be done?
Physically,
Yeah, somebody that doesn't want to listen to you.
again, there's a lot of
Say
constraints
yes or
there,
no,
but
and then you can explain it. Either it can or it can't, and then you can explain.
you can improperly build anything.
Okay. And that's your opinion.
It's not
And
my,
that's what we're asking. We're asking for your opinion.
but it has all these site constraints, challenges, obstructions, aside from area.
You've said all those things.
Yes, yes, sir.
I understand your position.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any other questions for him?
Just
Or
to
you wanna
clarify,
keep
there's
talking
access
again?
involved. There's access involved with getting to it, so to build a sign, you'd have access constraints to get to it, and that's why part of this application deals with access from Old William Penn Highway, a bridge across the river, the run, rather, and at this location. But
So if you were granted access, could you build a sign that complies with our ordinance?
I wouldn't recommend it. It'd be too
I
small.
know you do. I've heard that several times.
Yes.
I just want to know if you think physically you could do it. And again, I think you've answered the question.
Yes.
Yes, you could, but you wouldn't recommend it.
There weren't any variances needed for the access for the bridge.
Per your ordinance, that's correct, sir. But the highway, PennDOT would require permits to open up to access. The run has requirements that it has to be navigable if you're going to use the other side, so you'd have to,
Well, that would be true if we were building your sign or a sign that complies with the ordinance, right?
Yeah, you don't need a variance for that. That's not a ZHB.
Both
ordinance,
cases need the
that's correct.
access.
That's correct.
If I could just follow up with one more question. Would there be safety concerns with building a 150-foot square, I'm sorry, a 150-square-foot sign 24 feet above the highway at that location?
In my professional opinion, yes, because a driver would not be able to read it. If they chose to read it, it would translate into more time for eyes off the road. They'd have to read it at closer distances and higher speeds. Drivers are traveling well above the posted speed limit in this location. Would raise safety concerns, which is why PennDOT itself permits up to 1,200 square feet for a sign for speeds and number of lanes along these interstates. Interstates have higher speeds, more traffic, more lanes. It translates into allowing and permitting larger signs that are appropriate for the approach distances, times, and all those things. And that's why they set those requirements and permit them safely.
And let me ask you one more question. Would you have concerns about signs anywhere on the parcel without regard to what we're looking at now in Exhibit West 6?
I'm sorry, restate that question?
Would you have those same safety concerns if that 150-square-foot sign were being erected anywhere on the parcel without regard to what we're looking at in Exhibit 6?
Yes.
And do you hold those opinions to a reasonable degree of professional certainty?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next witness would be Joshua Hado, professional engineer. Mr. Hado, I'm hoping I didn't butcher your name the way I did the previous witnesses.
Sharon, do you have a spelling?
I
you have a s-
do.
Okay.
That's correct, Joshua Hado, Haydo.
Thank you.
And, Mr. Hado, can you tell the board your professional affiliation and what its address is?
I'm employed by David E. Worcester and Associates out of Grafton, Pennsylvania. We're a civil engineering firm focusing in traffic and permitting.
And Mr. Hado, you understand that we're here tonight because OWPH is proposing to erect a sign on property between Old William Penn Highway and the Parkway so that it can be viewed from the Parkway?
Yes.
If you can take a look at Exhibit 1, which should be on the board now, do you understand that to be the location of the sign that OWPH is proposing?
Yes.
And am I correct that you're here this evening to testify about traffic on this section of the Parkway?
Yes.
And about PennDOT's regulation of billboards like this?
Yes.
Mr. Hado, let me ask you a few questions about your qualifications. If you take a look at Exhibit 9 in our exhibit, I'm sorry, West 9, let me be clear, in our exhibit book, is that a copy of your CV? I should have found it for you, sorry.
That's all right. Yes, it is.
Can you tell the board if you have any education that's specific to civil or traffic engineering?
Yes, I have a Bachelor of Science from Virginia Tech in civil engineering.
Did you have any specialization within the civil engineering major at Virginia Tech?
Specializing in design briefly, but primarily traffic.
And are you a licensed or registered professional engineer in Pennsylvania?
Yes, I am.
For how long have you had that certification?
10 years in Pennsylvania.
Are you licensed or certified in any other states?
Yes, 8 in total.
Do you regularly review, analyze, engineer, and participate in the permitting process for traffic aspects of real property development?
Yes, I do.
And has your work previously included billboards before this application?
Yes, it has.
Can you tell the board on approximately how many occasions?
Maybe a dozen or so.
Generally, can you describe your experience or your involvement in the permitting and zoning approval process for billboards?
Yes, on a municipal level, I evaluate sites, prepare reports, do analysis, and look specifically at ordinance or code requirements pertaining to traffic and billboards.
That's primarily the municipal level?
Correct.
Do you do any work on the permitting process for billboards at the state or Commonwealth level?
Yes.
Can you describe that?
Yes, as a firm, Worcester and Associates is primarily involved with obtaining permits for access to the billboards, as was referenced earlier, access from state highways that allows, the maintenance and upkeep of, and construction of the billboards.
Okay. At this time, we'd offer Mr. Hato as an expert in traffic engineering and the billboard permitting process.
Okay.
Can you describe for the board what PennDOT's role will be in permitting and approving the proposed billboard?
Yes, they will review all relevant plans in accordance with their criteria. And if all of their criteria are met, they will permit the necessary permit to construct and maintain the billboard.
Okay. We have a fairly extensive exhibit in our book. It's exhibit number 10. And it is chapter 445 of 67 Pennsylvania Code. Are you familiar with chapter 445?
Yes, I am.
What is it?
It pertains to outdoor advertising devices. It discusses, or it contains the Department of Transportation's requirements relative to things like size, spacing, lighting, and access to outdoor advertising devices, billboards.
Okay. And that's a separate approval process from what we're here on tonight, correct?
Correct.
To your understanding, is the proposed billboard on this site in compliance with all of PennDOT's regulations for outdoor advertising devices?
Yes, I believe it is.
Let me ask you a few questions about this parcel specifically and this sign specifically. If you can take a look at Exhibit 5 in the exhibit book. And this is a document to which the previous witness made reference. Feel free to take a look at it. Do you know what that exhibit is?
Yes, this is a study that was prepared by myself. It is a speed study relative to speeds on the parkway in the vicinity of this proposed billboard.
Did you said you prepared it, was it solely you or with the assistance or cooperation of others?
With assistance and cooperation of others.
Can you briefly explain to the board the methodology for conducting this sort of study?
Sure. Visited the site, drove past it, in multiple directions, evaluating sight lines, which were, depicted on previous exhibits, coordinated the data collection, evaluated the data when it came back into the office, and, produced the report of my findings and my conclusions.
Let me ask you a quick question then. You can look at, on the attachments, or you have them down as enclosures. And this is the last page of the exhibit.
Correct.
Can you explain what this table shows and how that information was collected?
These are the results of a radar speed study. It was conducted on June 13th, 2023, approximately 11 o'clock a.m. in sunny conditions, warm weather, with a radar speed gun. We selected 50 data points, free-flowing traffic, to identify predominant speeds. And the results of that I'm sorry. unless
Go
you're
ahead.
gonna
No,
ask-
please
You're
do.
going to ask that
No.
separately.
We were gonna get there anyway.
We identify average speeds, and what we typically use across a lot of analyses in the traffic engineering profession are 85th percentile speeds. And the 85th percentile speeds identified in this location is 71 miles per hour.
Okay, and just to be really obvious about it, that means that approximately 15% of the traffic is traveling faster,
Correct.
and 85% of the traffic is traveling at that speed or slower.
Correct.
Is this a type of study that you've performed at other locations?
Yes.
Have you ever performed a study like this for a proposed billboard before?
Not for a billboard, no.
For what other types of uses?
We identify speeds on roadways in nearly all of our traffic studies, primarily relative, or for the evaluation of sight distance, sight lines. Often, just through practical experience, you all may know, posted speed limit is not always adhered to, so it's a matter of safety. We don't design sight lines or anything visual, assuming that people are going the posted speed limit. So we always do speed studies to see exactly how fast people are really going and design to that standard.
Okay, and I noticed the date of the report that we've submitted, or that's submitted here as West 5 is today. Were there previous drafts of this report?
Yes.
Did they include the same conclusions as to the speed on that section of the parkway?
Yes.
Have you analyzed whether installation of the proposed billboard at this location is likely to have any adverse impact on traffic safety?
Yes, I have.
And did you prepare a report on that?
Yes, I did.
You can take a look at Exhibit West 12, which is going to be very close to the back of the book.
Okay.
And can you identify that document for us?
Yes, that is a separate evaluation that I prepared relative to crashes on that, or crash rates on that segment of the parkway.
Okay. And what's the methodology for a report like that?
So we obtained data from PennDOT for five years historically. The number of accidents, that occurred in that segment of roadway, approximately half a mile on either side of the location of the subject sign. There are formulas that take into account things like the number of lanes, the volume of traffic on the roadway. In this case, that particular segment carries almost 63,000 vehicles a day. The posted speed, the observed 85th percentile speed, and we calculate a crash rate, which is the crash rate per million miles traveled for that specific segment of roadway based on real accident data over the past 5 years.
And did you reach a conclusion about the relative safety of this segment of the parkway?
Yes.
Can you tell the board what it was?
Yes, PennDOT also has, based on classification of roadway, roadways of this nature, limited access, this volume of traffic, et cetera, an average crash rate, or an expected crash rate, statewide. And we found that the crash rate at this specific location is lower than that expected crash rate, meaning that this is not an area that sees higher than normal incidents of accidents.
Did you conduct a similar study for other areas along the parkway in and around Monroeville?
Yes, I did.
And can you take a look at Exhibit West 11, which will precede that?
Ask you a quick question. Who is Mr. Wolfington, Wolfgate Development?
Mr. Wolfington will actually be testifying later. He's one of the principals of the company. Wolfgate Development is sort of an umbrella. OWPH is, I don't want to get myself in
That's okay.
trouble and describe it as a subsidiary, but it's
Thank you.
generally affiliated.
Okay.
So if you could describe for the board the study that Exhibit West 11 reflects?
This is a similar evaluation that I prepared, evaluating crash rates, but rather than at the proposed billboard location, this was done about a half a mile to the west at an existing billboard of the same proximate size, height, dimensions. It's kind of right on the border of Monroeville and Penn Hills, you may know. Heading inbound, it would be on your right. Same methodology, pulled five years of historic crash data, identified the crash rate, compared it to the state, or the expected crash rate, and found that also it was very well below, suggesting that, you know, the presence of that sign did not, you know, cause crash rates in that segment of roadway to be any higher than those elsewhere on the parkway.
Okay, and the opinions you've expressed here about speed on that stretch of the parkway and the relative safety of that stretch of the parkway, both in the immediate area of the sign and elsewhere within the municipality, do you hold those opinions to a reasonable degree of professional certainty?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Hato, I don't think I have any more questions for you right now. The board or the solicitor certainly may.
Just a couple. Did you ever look at the Monroeville zoning ordinance?
Yes, I did.
And did you look at it in respect to this particular application?
Yes, in as much as it pertains to the variances being requested, yes.
Okay. And have you ever testified anywhere about variances at municipalities?
Yes.
And have you ever offered any opinions concerning variances and what creates a hardship and what doesn't?
Not so much relative to the hardships, no, but, you know,
I
a
mean,
common.
You're the speed guy. You're the guy that measures the speed and the highways.
Common factors that or common criteria that I see in municipal ordinances pertaining to billboards are, you know, does it obstruct sight lines for motorists? Does it obstruct traffic control devices? That's generally when I'm looking at it.
So you don't offer any testimony concerning whether or not the applicant has made out a variance or not? You testify to the traffic?
To the traffic safety,
Okay.
that it will not, you know, be detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare.
Okay.
Not as to whether or not not typically as to whether or not there's a hardship.
That's all I have. Anybody else on the board?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I am pretty confident that we can get through the next witness. I'm actually confident we can get through the next witness, and I'm optimistic we might be able to get through at least most of our last witness between now and 10 o'clock.
Thank you.
So with that goal, I'd call Andrew Schwartz.
Who's been waiting patiently over by the door.
As you get older, you can't sit as long.
Mr. Schwartz, could you identify yourself for the board and the court reporter?
Andrew Schwartz with Environmental Planning and Design.
And where is Environmental Planning and Design located?
100 Ross Street, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 15219.
You understand that OWPH is proposing to erect a sign on a property between Old William Penn Highway and the Parkway, so that it can be viewed from the Parkway?
Yes.
And looking again at exhibit number West 1, do you understand that to be the location of the proposed sign?
Yes.
And you are here to testify about the suitability of that parcel for other uses that are allowed in C2 districts and the need for the variances that OWPH has requested here?
Yes.
Take a look at Exhibit West 12 in the exhibit books. I believe it's the next to last exhibit. You identify that document for the board?
That would be my CV.
And can you describe, I'm sorry, did your education prepare you in any way to express the opinions you expect to express here this evening?
Yes.
Could you describe that education for us?
I have an undergraduate degree in landscape architecture from Penn State University, and I have a master's in urban and regional planning from University of Michigan.
And since obtaining the master's degree, have you, or even before, have you obtained any professional licenses or certifications?
I hold landscape architecture licenses in 6 states, pending maybe a couple other states. Currently, AICP, so that's the American Institute of Certified Planners. That's a national standard. I also hold a special certification through AICP, which is for Certified Urban Designer. And there's 100 or less than 100 of us across the country. I also have certifications in leadership and energy and environmental design, as well as sites, AP, et cetera. All related to land use planning, land planning.
And those certifications are outlined in your CV?
Correct.
Okay. How long have you been with environmental planning and design?
You're making me date myself. 1989.
Well, that's right there in the CV. So,
It is. I've been practicing about 34 years, I guess, doing the math. Certified planner for 28 or 29 years.
and have you ever testified before a zoning board or governing body with regard to variance requests before?
Yes.
Approximately how many occasions?
Oh, well, those are listed in the CV. I would say in front of zoning hearing board, probably 5 or 6 or 7 times.
And have you been accepted as an expert before those boards?
Oh, yes.
At this time, we'd offer Mr. Schwartz as an expert in land planning and land use planning. Let me ask you to take a look at you have a larger version of it, but the document that, and the board has a larger version too, but the document that we've talked about marked as Exhibit West 6. Were you involved in the preparation of that document?
Yes, our firm prepared it. I was intimately involved.
Can you describe how it was prepared?
Using, this is a little bit of a rehash in terms of some of the material that Michael had gone through. So using the survey, the topographic and the property survey, as well as the Monroeville ordinance requirements, FEMA information related to floodplain, floodway, et cetera, and the site plan then in terms of the actual billboard location. The graphic in terms of those tiled maps that you have in that packet for West 6, those are all built off of the survey, so everything's oriented the same way, and you guys have kind of gone through that numerous times.
Fair enough. But let me ask you in particular about the last page of the exhibit. There were some questions when Mr. Tantella was testifying about the 2 shades of essentially pink on this particular page of the exhibit. Could you explain those for do you understand what the difference is between the 2
Yes,
shades of pink?
yes.
Could you explain those for the board?
Sure. If you back up, though, to the previous map, so that's where we took the regulatory requirements that are in the actual municipal ordinance. So that's where the front yard setback and the building setback lines in terms of the 10 feet and the 40 feet. When I then apply that to all the other restrictions, so this is just like adding on everything on top and kind of deducting out what is the remaining balance, so to speak. That's what produced the last map. The 2 shades of color, and this is the clarification, particularly for the solicitor. So the more kind of, I'll call it reddish, brick red shade, is land that could be used for parking, stormwater, landscaping. Because it's the area that is sandwiched between the front yard setback and the building setback. The only place you could build a building or a structure is in that more purplish color, which on your maps would have the little number 6 in it. So that equates to about 60 square feet, okay? And it's about 3.75 foot wide. It's a little longer, but that's how narrow it is in terms of size. So we just tried to give you that information. So I can build a building in the purplish color or structure. I can't do that in the reddish area. I can do parking, stormwater, landscape.
And otherwise have the other elements of Exhibit West 6 been accurately described in the previous testimony?
Yes, yeah.
Have you had a chance to examine the other uses that are permitted in C2 districts of Monroeville?
Yes.
I'm gonna put this on here, and it might be helpful to the board if we could turn the camera on.
You're gonna have to really
And zoom on it, because I'm afraid it's a very
We can
small
zoom.
image.
Do you guys mind if I move over here, because I can't see the screen if he's asking me specific questions? Oh, you may want to read off.
Okey dokey. Okay. The question in general is going to be whether any of the permitted uses in the C2 district, which are in the central column of that exhibit, are feasible on this property without variances, and I will read those to you, and they are amusement use, auditorium, banks, business college, business services, club, convention center, department store, food services, forestry activities and timber harvesting, funeral home, medical clinic, nurseries, offices, personal services, restaurant bar, retail stores, shopping center, studio, theater, vehicle sales room, veterinary clinic, and accessory uses. Would any of those be appropriate for this parcel, or let me rephrase that. Could this parcel be developed for any of those uses consistent with the requirements of the zoning ordinance?
Each of those uses generally, when you look down at that list, they have a building attached to them. And to go back to that map that we just talked about, I got 58 square feet. So if I can build a convention center with 58 square feet, God bless you, then we can have a convention center there. And I would say forestry would be one of the only uses, okay? So I think probably 95% of them, you physically couldn't, as permitted uses, while they're permitted by right, you couldn't actually reasonably develop them, given the lay of the land. And again, the C2 district, remember, the C2 district is largely what we all think of as Business 22. It's the same district. So all those uses that Stuart just read through, those are the same uses that fundamentally from the north side of 22 to Northern Pike, Monroeville Boulevard, the same uses. And when I got 58 square feet, I'm not gonna get a shopping center.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get a retail store, those types of things. So while on paper it says it, when you actually apply the standard to the circumstance, you can't really feasibly do it. And it's not even kind of close. It's,
Would the stream and the slopes tend to impair any forestry use of the parcel?
yeah. So when I made the comment about forestry, in those areas that could be used for parking or for that possibly. But again, back to some of the previous testimony, we know that's kind of residual land. Sumac, that's what's there. Tree of heaven, it's not marketable timber by any stretch of the imagination. So your ordinance follows the MPC. It has to be, forestry has to be a use permitted by right in all districts. That's why it's in there, not that there's any feasibility to forestry. So again, while it says it in words, applying it to the circumstance, not feasible.
Okay. Let me ask you the same question about conditional uses, and I think it'd be helpful if I listed those. Obviously, billboards is a conditional use in the C2 district. The others are church, commercial communication tower, commercial communication antenna, commercial commuter lot, drive-in restaurant, drive-in theater, gas station, heliport, hotel, major excavation, public use, utility substation, vehicle sales area, and vehicle services. Would any of those be developable on this parcel in strict compliance with the zoning code?
I think, again, just like the permitted uses, the vast majority of those uses as conditional also have a building kind of assumed. And again, if I'm in that 58 square foot kind of sliver that is left, I would say no. Things like a commercial communications tower, while you could potentially get the tower, we are in a valley. That's situationally what this is, right? And I believe if you really go into the ordinance, and I don't remember the section right off the top of my head, Paul, you may know. So the tower requirement, I think if it wants to exceed the 45-foot building height that's allowed in C2, you can go up for 1 foot extra elevation, you have to do 1 foot setback. So I think when I did the math, I could get a tower up to maybe between 75 and 85 feet in height. Now, that means that that tower gets pushed to the center of the parcel, which goes down over the hill. Again, it almost renders it useless because I need that cellular antenna, which is the array at the top of the tower, to actually be above the ridge because it's supposed to be shooting the beams, you know, to disperse, not just within the parkway corridor. So while again, you might be able to, because it's not much different than the billboard, I'm not sure from a practicality standpoint, in this, applying it to these parcels along this stretch of Old William Penn, that you can actually do it.
Were you present this evening for Mr. Tantella's testimony?
Yes, other than when I had a good stretch. But I could hear in the hallway.
Okay. Did you agree with his conclusions regarding whether OWPH has met the variance standards under the various sections of the zoning code?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Can you very briefly explain why?
Again, I think what they're proposing, and I think there was, before I answer that, I think earlier there was a question, again, I believe the solicitor had asked, in that number 6 area that's shown on the map, could you build a billboard? Yeah, you could build a billboard. And I think the caveat was to the standards of the municipality as it is drafted today. If you look back at the site plan, as you go to that number 6 area, that goes down over the hill. What will happen is because of the size limit on that face and the height of the tower, it's actually, top of the sign would be like road level. So it almost renders it invisible. You wouldn't be able to see it. And so while the answer probably is I could get it there, the great question is there's no practicality in terms of doing that. And does, again, the standards that are in the ordinance, again, because it's applying something that was really designed for Business 22 to these weird parcels on this old section of Old William Penn, it doesn't work real well. And so I don't know what else to say on that one, but it's kind of questionable. So it goes back to your question. I think the solutions that are offered in trying to remedy the hardships is the best approach, because I think it is trying to balance the public safety, the visibility, property owners' use and enjoyment of the property, et cetera. And then obviously the spirit of what you guys are trying to accomplish in terms of the ordinance.
Now, the opinions you've expressed here tonight about the need for variances to develop a billboard and the unsuitability of the parcel for the other permitted and conditional uses in the C2 district, do you hold those opinions to a reasonable degree of professional certainty?
Yes.
I have no further questions for you, the solicitor or the board may.
Anybody?
Anybody have any questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I've forgotten how far ahead I've set my watch. My guess is that if I were to call Mr. Wolfington, I'd need about 15 or 20 minutes.
Well, let's do this. Let's bring you back next month, because they're gonna have to digest what you've given them so far. My suggestion is that we just table this matter tonight, leave the record open, and we'll hear from the last witness,
One more witness.
next month, and then you might be in a position to make a decision. You'll have 45 days from the date we close the testimony. So the testimony will remain open tonight, and chances are we close it next month, starting at 7 o'clock again, 7:30. So a motion would be in order at this point to table the matter until next month, leaving the record open.
I have a question before we get into a motion. Do you plan on having all the same testimony and witnesses for the other property, other site?
You know, I was hoping we could stipulate to certain things like qualifications and just say that the witness would testify as they testified with regard to the west site.
Okay.
There are some differences. As you've probably looked through things, you've noticed that the site plan's a little different, the survey's a little different. The work that EPD has done on this project is gonna be a little different as well. But we could probably, with certain stipulations, if the board were amenable to them, cut down on the amount of
Sure,
time.
there is a lot of repetition. I just wanted them to be aware that
Yeah.
the next meeting is probably gonna be very similar to this one.
Yes, and I'm hoping we can make it shorter, but we are going to have to get through the nuts and bolts of where things go and how far away from things they need to be.
Okay.
I have a question as well. The next meeting, when you come back, is there a way to see a graphic of where the sign is in reference to the direction sign and the PennDOT sign? Because weren't they all kind of in the same area?
That's something we can certainly ask about, or try to develop and see if it makes
Yeah,
sense to
because
come
I would
back
like to
with it.
see where they are all in reference to each other.
If you could add that to Exhibit West 8 and the similar one for East, it's,
Yeah, we might do it. I mean, Mr. Tantella prepared that. He might or might not be the appropriate person to do that. If it's not him, we'd probably mark it as an additional exhibit, but yes. Yeah. All right?
Okay, so a motion's in order.
I'll make a motion to table.
Second, please.
And leave the record open.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor of tabling all 10 items, correct?
Right?
Say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
We have a date? Do we know the date?
Would be.
first Wednesday of the month.
Yeah, it's first Wednesday.
Wednesday after Labor Day.
Be the 6th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. We have a motion, one final motion, please,
Motion to adjourn.
to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Motion, second, please. Second, motion and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.